Okay, we are live with Fabio Campanella and Angelo Vumbaca. Did I say it properly?
Excellent.
Okay,
Perfect.
great. It's the Italian festival episode of Your Life, Your Terms.
We're going to bring
Paul
the
just
pizza.
want, yeah. But let's talk about something really important before we get started. What's going on with I don't know if you guys follow soccer or not. This might be news to you. You probably don't know this. But Italy isn't in the upcoming World Cup. But now I heard there's a waiter a restaurant here in Oakville that we go to. An Italian waiter was explaining to me how they're going to get in. First of all, he told me that Italy isn't going to get in because there was enough bets by the Italian mafia for them to lose against North Macedonia. That the loss was intentional against North Macedonia.
That makes sense.
And that was a done deal. That was totally set up to lose, so some guys can make a whole bunch of money. But now there's two countries that are facing some sort of sanctions. I don't know if it's Iran and another country that might not be in the World Cup. And so he's saying there'll be a couple spots, and Italy's probably going to get in. And if they get in, they're going to win. So now I've gone again. Angela, I didn't let you know this. My father's Croatian.
Oh,
so, we grew up, he's like a diehard soccer fan, Croatia
That's
forever, awesome. And this waiter is explaining to me how Italy, not only are they going to get in, they're going to win. And I'm like, well, they did win the Euro. I mean, if they get in, it's kind of like this all-star crew. They could get in. We are trying to get tickets for Qatar. I also mentioned this to our because you know why? Because Croatia is going to play Canada.
Yeah, that's pretty intense.
I mean, that's kind of fun.
There,
when that seems pretty something I wouldn't mind checking out.
Yeah.
And so we'll see. Nobody seems too interested to go to Qatar when I say that.
It's not the first my first choice. I know nothing about it, but
But anyway, so I don't know how closely you guys track this, but you should know Italy's currently not in the World Cup. I don't know what to say.
I'm a big soccer fan.
You have to come. Angelo's making himself comfortable.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you got to lean up right into this. So tell us.
I'm a big soccer fan. I don't want to waste too much time talking about it. I have a lot of Croatian friends, by the way, and we are big fans of each other's teams until we meet with each other. We meet up against each other. But as far as your friend at the restaurant, I think he's pulling your leg. So we'll just leave it at that. I don't think Italy has a chance to beat it.
I think they're out, man.
Yeah.
Listen, every time I think Italy's out of some soccer tournament, they come out, they somehow get in or they win. How many World Cups have we all seen when it's 0-0-0-0, then they're on to the next round with a 1-0 penalty shootout? I mean, Italy's got this incredible knack.
They figure it out.
They just figure it
out.
They figure it out. The Croatians, I feel like, always give Italy a hard time because they kind of play with their elbows pretty liberally. Like Croatians, they're not going to take crap. And Italy plays a different style. So the Croatians are going to come in strong with the elbows, and Italians don't really play that style.
The acting thing, the ground.
Yeah. It's all serious. It's all serious business. But so Fab, you had this great idea to bring Angelo in here.
Yeah.
Kick us off.
Okay, I'll kick you off. Obviously, anybody who's listened to this podcast regularly may have heard about estate planning. I've come on and talked about estate planning and life insurance a couple of times. I teach a course for you guys on estate planning and life insurance. The big limitation with my expertise when it comes to estate planning, life insurance, or transferring an estate to the next generation is really the legal aspect of it. I know enough about it to really start causing damage with my recommendations. So, people talk about probate planning, people talk about secondary wills, so on and so forth. And I want to even bring it back to the basics, right? What is a will? What happens when you pass away without a will and you have assets that you want going to the next generation? If we have time, maybe with the basics of a trust, putting assets into trust. But this is why I brought Angelo on. Angelo is my number one resource for this kind of stuff. He's the first guy I go to when I have an estate issue from a legal perspective.
And why is that? Sorry, I know you know a lot of people, so why Angelo specifically?
Angelo specifically because he just knows it like the back of his hand. So I don't want...
Okay, so this goes to what we were talking about, how you kind of got pulled into this over the last however many years, and he's become an expert in it.
So when I want to be able to send one email to the lawyer and then forget about it completely. It's not something I really want to be too involved in because once I start getting involved in something that I'm not qualified to do, then, problems start arising.
And Fab, for people who are new to the podcast and haven't heard you before, so back up one step.
Yep.
Who are you and what do you do?
Right. So I'm Fabio Campanella. I run the Campanella Group, which is really a family office. If you look at it, it's an accounting firm combined with an investment firm combined with an estate planning life insurance firm. So I look at the whole gamut of financial planning, tax planning, and investment planning for my clients. And I'm the quarterback that brings you to, okay, you need this lawyer, you need this professional, you need this valuator, you need this realtor, so on and so forth. So I stand at the top. I say, okay, give me the bird's eye view of the client's situation, and I bring you to the right professionals. That's kind of the way you want to look.
And you're seeing it over the years where people just don't have a will at all?
They think they have a will. Maybe it's very old. They have incorrect beneficiary designations on life insurance policies, RRSPs, TFSAs. They have tax planning, probate planning opportunities with second wills. Maybe they need an estate freeze. There's a lot of issues with people's wills because what happens is when people get married and when they start off the process, money's tight. They get a will kit. They go to whomever it is, my uncle, who's an almost retired lawyer, drafted my will.
I remember those wills that you could buy at Grandin Toy. Is Grandin Toy even around anymore?
I don't think so
either.
I don't
But
know.
remember Grandin Toy?
Yeah, I remember.
And they had those like carousels,
kit, yeah.
and you buy a will
Buy a
kit,
will,
and like
$50,
people,
done,
yeah,
right?
and
$50, and then you're gonna have a $500,000 property.
Okay, so how do we begin then here with Angelo? Is it what is a will? Where
I would say the best place to start is, okay, we have a family who are real estate investors, and they have a nice little portfolio of investment properties. They have a cottage, and they have their primary home, 2 or 3 children that they want to leave these assets to. What is the problem, Angelo, that you see if they die without a will?
Well, I mean, anyone that owns at least one asset should have a will. And it's shocking how many people don't. I've been doing this for 25 years, I was mentioning to you before, and it amazes me every time I get the call. I'll get a call from someone who's like, my dad passed away, my mom passed away, someone dear to me passed away, and what do? I know they have some assets, in various jurisdictions. I'll be, okay, no problem. Send me a copy of the will. We'll start with that. Oh, I don't think there is one. I don't know if there is one.
It's sorry to interrupt. We're dealing. It's so funny you're saying this today. An email just came into us where someone is having some health issues. The daughter was able to figure out in the hospital that this person owns some assets, but that's all they know. Yeah. They don't know if there's a will. They don't know where the assets are. In this case, it's some rental property. They don't know they don't know the addresses of the properties.
Right.
They think they're in Ontario. That's all they know. And they're now trying to piece together the information. So I guess you're right. Like, I'm just shocked when I see that kind of thing.
It's so important that I say this because most people don't believe me. And I can tell by, your reaction. So just to give you an example, I get calls from people, like I do work with various trust companies, the banks. They'll refer me clients to prepare their wills because the banks are conflicted out whenever they're appointed executors and things like that, and attorneys under financial powers of attorney. And I'll meet with so many people from all different walks of life, and you'd be so surprised. There are people with a lot of assets that never even thought about getting a will done. I'll give you an example of last week. I met with a couple that were referred to me, an elderly couple. I would say they were mid to late 80s. And they were referred to me by an existing client. So they came to me on a referral basis, meaning they trusted their friend who sent them to me, who's been a client of mine for many, many, many years. And husband and wife, and the wife was actually very poignant and actually I would say almost confrontational with me in her questioning about why she needed a will. And she actually said to me, "Why do I need a will?" And I said, "Well," and I started explaining the reasons why. She said, "Well, that's ridiculous. It's just an excuse for lawyers to make money and the government to charge taxes." And I said, "Well, I can see how you see that. But, you're talking about someone who amassed quite a bit of assets during their lifetime. Not just, a home today in the GTA is worth $1 million minimum, I would say, right?
Couple, yeah.
Some money in the bank, maybe RSPs, a pension, some life insurance. It's not hard to hit $3 to $5 million for the average family by the date of death. I would say that's even a really low number nowadays if you live in the GTA. And that's not being pretentious by any means, but we know what the value of real estate is in the GTA. So anyway, going back, what I would say is, to the beginning is, why do you need a will? It's simple. When you die, someone needs to know what to do with your assets. If you don't tell them in a legal document, then what happens is the government, meaning we have laws that will dictate what happens to your assets. So
And what is it that happens if you don't have a will?
So if you die without a will, it's called intestate. You are dying intestate without a will. Testate means you have a will. Intestate means you die without a will. And we have specific laws that govern the distribution of your assets pursuant to an intestacy. Oh, sorry, is that too far?
You're good. No, you're good. You're good.
So, when you start explaining to people, okay, so you don't have a will, so you really don't care. My example to the elderly woman, you don't care what happens to all your assets then. So the government's going to determine that a certain proportion or percentage goes to your spouse, and then the balance is divided among your children according to a certain, distribution, how many kids there are.
And the government has a formula for this?
There is, yeah.
Holy smokes.
This is embedded in legislation. There's specific acts meaning laws, that deal with the distribution of assets, just like the Family Law Act deals with how you would equalize assets upon a separation or divorce.
But this is horrible. If somebody passes away accidentally without a will, the government just has this formula that dictates how the estate's handled? Never mind old age.
Well,
right.
Yeah, logically, they would have to. Otherwise, what would happen?
Yes, I've just never thought about this. I feel like I've had some sort of will ongoing for a while now.
Right. But I mean, ultimately, like right now as a tax planner, financial planner, all kinds of red flags are popping up on the play here, right? If we're going by what the government is telling us, and you have a bunch of assets, Angelo, right? And obviously nobody has any of the laws memorized, but you have a house, a cottage, a this, a that, a the other, and you die intestate. Certain things are going to go over to the spouse. We're going to get our tax-free rollover there. Certain things are going to go to the children. That's going to trigger tax to the estate. Mm-hmm. Then who's going to be the executor? The executor is supposed to be a fiduciary for the debtor.
Who is the executor in that case?
Yeah.
So you have a will, you get to pick who's going to be your executor. If you don't have a will and you die intestate, then basically what happens is someone has to come forward. Someone with a vested interest will usually come forward, meaning a beneficiary. It may be a child, a spouse, right?
Got it.
A distant relative who has a vested interest in seeing this estate administered, right? Or these assets distributed. So what do they do? Well, they have to hire a lawyer, and the lawyer will prepare paperwork to go to court and explain to the court why they would be the best suitable person to be the estate trustee or the executor. Now, if it's not an immediate relation, meaning a spouse or a child, and not even a child, if the spouse is deceased and there are children, they would be the obvious choice, the de facto choice of the court. But it gets more complicated than that, right? If there is a non-resident who's applying, the rule is that you have to post a bond with the court. Why? So this was a funny little exchange I had with this woman. By the way, they were Asian, so they were permanent residents, but they were from China, and they moved here, I think, in the 70s, and they've been here ever since. No children. A few relatives that all lived outside of Canada. The U.S., and
so it was a
China.
non-resident who was trying to be the executor.
No, I'm going to explain to you where I'm going with this. So the issue is they were both elderly. So one of them dies, the surviving spouse would apply to be the executor. because they're resident in Ontario, not even Canada. The courts want you to be resident in the province in which the assets to be administered are primarily located. Okay? There's a lot of complications with wills and estate planning that people are unfamiliar with. And that's what baffles me. I want to make just a little sidebar note here is that people will go online and download a will for $50.
Some of those are my friends for sure.
Are they? Well, listen.
Tom, I saved all this money. I have a will. I filled in some blanks. I filled in the blanks here.
And I've seen them. And, it baffles me because if you own anything, anything that's worth something,
listen,
why wouldn't you
we see that all the time. We help people buy rental property. We can get them to spend $800,000 on a property. Sometimes we can't get them to spend $50 to advertise the property that it's available for rent.
Right.
We're like, how did we fail so bad on this part where we were able to get you to actually buy the thing? But I think that.
And the answer is very simple, right? It's about education, right? You have to educate people, not in an arrogant way, but not everybody knows this stuff. That's why we're here today, right? Fab's here talking about accounting and tax, which I'm not an expert on. So he talks about that. I'll talk about the legal aspect of it. And I find that most of the time, just like that nice couple in my office last week, it was just hilarious. We were just sitting there listening to it, and they were, they just wouldn't accept the fact that they need a will. Right? So anyway, there's people like that. And by the time they left my office, they understood. And in fact, they had even asked me to be their estate trustee by the end of it, which is a big compliment, right? I typically decline that position. I'll always refer them to a friend or someone else because, there's quite a bit of money in this business of estate planning, okay? You've got the largest transfer of wealth happening in human history in the next 10 years with the baby boomers aging and dying. And all of those assets that fall within an estate that are going to be administered, people don't understand. Say, I'm going to pick this guy to be the estate trustee or my youngest kid or my cousin Larry. What they don't understand is, A, it is an extremely difficult job. Extremely difficult. It takes typically 3 to 5 years to administer an estate from start to finish. And that's a moderate estate with basic assets. If it's a complex estate with, family trusts, numerous properties, foreign jurisdiction properties and all that, you're looking at 10 years. So the law and the courts have recognized this onerous job, and they have prescribed compensation for executors, because otherwise you appoint somebody as an executor, they're going to kill themselves for this thankless job, not get paid for it. What's in it for them? So the question I always get is, well, how much can an executor charge to be an executor? Well, let me tell you that the banks in this country, and I'm going to name one of them in particular, which is one I do a lot of business with, which is TD, and the Canada Trust Company, built their business being corporate executors. They made a lot of money doing this.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And they continue to make a lot of money doing this. And one would say, well, that sounds kind of no, it's not underhanded. They serve a vital role. I'll give you the example of the couple that was in my office that they've got no one else to pick who's a resident to be an estate trustee. They had a sister. The woman has a sister who's 90 years old. I said, that's not a good choice. You gotta pick somebody who's going to be around by the time you die, right? So in cases like that, and believe it or not, I get quite a few of those where they have nobody. Like I've had couples come to me that no children, no grandchildren, no relatives. I'm like,
so they choose someone at the bank?
So what I typically would do is I would push them in the direction of speaking with their bank, whichever one it is. They have trust department. The big five have trust divisions.
I had no idea.
Yeah. And they act as corporate executors. And so let me explain to you why they do this, right? So A, it's very efficient. I will always refer them to the bank. People will ask me, what about you? And I can charge the same amount of money as a bank for doing the same job. However, most of the time I prefer not to. There are lawyers that have set up a business of being estate trustees. Okay? It's very lucrative. Just like personal injury lawyers, you hear about these 30%, contingency fees. So what's prescribed by the legislation is 5%. So typically the fee is 2.5% of capital receipts coming into the estate, 2.5% on disbursements, distributions going out. So 5%. Think about it. $1 million, $50,000 would be the minimum.
Wow.
Then, if there are trusts within the will for minor children, disabled individuals, spousal trusts, there is an ongoing management fee for managing these trusts. And that's negotiable with the bank. I know that the banks will typically, the more money you're giving them to settle, or administer, the lower the fee, obviously. There needs to be an incentive for you to go to them, right? So I've seen these fees go from 5% down to 3% for some estates that are $10, $20, $30 million. And then the bank will administer these. So let's say you've got children who are under 18, 10, 12 years old, parents are gone, and everything goes to them. Well, they can't get anything by law until they're 18. Or whatever the parent decides. A lot of times the parent will set up trusts at different, milestones. They'll get a third at 18, another third at the age of 25, maybe the balance at 30,
Sure.
because they feel that they're too young and immature to handle all that kind of money. But somebody's got to be administering these investments for the kids and for their benefit.
Yeah, makes sense.
Right? So they get paid for that. So it's a very lucrative area.
I
Now,
don't know. For some reason, I just hate hearing about it. But yeah, I get it. It's starting to make sense to me. I had no idea. I didn't know this was like a division.
There's many people involved. If we rewind, for people who have never heard of this, it all makes sense to me. It all makes sense to you. But for people who have never heard of this,
I think it's because our family comes from nothing, Fab. So there was never, this is a new concept to us.
Well,
there was nothing to administer at any level of our family until maybe this generation.
So this generation, that's going to be with a lot of like immigrant families,
Sure,
right? But the reality is that you have to face it, and there's going to be a huge wealth transfer. So if we rewind back, we look at the relationship of the different individuals. There's the people that are passing away, who have assets. When they pass away, de facto, right? Like the assets go to their estate, which is a form of it's a trust.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say from a tax perspective, we call it now a graduated rate estate. And this becomes formed immediately after someone's death. That estate must be administered and managed by someone, and that's the estate trustee, or also known as the executor, That individual, so there's the people that died, their estate, the beneficiaries to the estate, the people who get the benefit of the estate, and the executor or estate trustee who manages that estate. The executor has a fiduciary, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the executor has a fiduciary responsibility or a fiduciary duty to the creditors of the estate.
to the beneficiaries.
And to the beneficiaries.
Right.
And to the CRA. So the person you are choosing, you want to choose that person. You don't want the government choosing that person for you. So to me, that is one of the most important things, all right? Because this particular person that you choose, you want to make sure that they have everybody's best interest in them, not that they just want to scoop up some money, right? This is a huge role.
Yeah, I didn't know they can get paid. It kind of bothers me that they can get paid, I'll tell you.
Well, it's a very...
But I see, I understand now. I understand better
Right.
now. But I just, as hearing this for the first time, I'm like,
personally, I never accept the position as a state trustee. I don't care how much. It's just not. I'm not interested in it.
But I get it. Like someone like in your situation, if you're asked this all the time and you accept this, you could be spending huge chunks of your weeks and months doing this stuff. So I get it now.
It's better that that's all you do.
Yeah.
Understood. Right. So that's why Angelo, just to give a caveat here, this is why Angelo refers to the banks. That they have a division.
Yeah, they're good at it. You kind of outsource it. Yeah,
that's all they do.
I should point out, I don't only refer to the banks. I know people who it's their business and their profession
makes sense
to do this.
Yeah,
and most of them are lawyers, but not always. And because you need people who know what they're doing, who know their way around the system. So the reason I decline this a lot of times is, maybe as I get older, I won't, as I start scaling back what I'm doing now. But I'm so busy now doing everything else that it would just absorb all my time.
Yeah, I get that now. For some reason, I just thought it was like, hey, get the assets all listed out, chop it up. Okay, this person's getting this person's getting that. We got some bills to pay. It's in an afternoon.
But you're
we just do it in an afternoon.
But you're assuming it's a clean estate.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, but even that, you're right. If there's properties to be sold, calculating the taxes on it, who owns it, was there somebody else on the property? Is there joint ventures to think about? The bank fees. There's all these things.
There's many things, and then the other thing that I'm sure you see that I see. Whenever I'm planning an estate or putting in a life insurance. Perfect example today. I got a client inquiry, and it's a relatively young couple, 39 and I think they were 39, 40 years old, 3 children, and one of the children is severely disabled, right? So heavy real estate investors, very illiquid. Where do we get the liquidity to take care of this child who will live full term?
Yeah, you need someone who's going to manage that. Yeah, I get it now.
Right?
Yeah.
Where are you going to get the cash, right? So they don't have a will. Obviously, I'm going to be introducing them to Angelo.
Yeah,
they don't have a will. So what happens? We have all these illiquid assets. If they were to die in a car accident tomorrow,
oh my God,
what's going to happen to these young children?
Right.
And then to Angelo, your point just about the baby boomers. Now, like my father's 82, turning 83. I feel like that's leading edge of the baby boomers. But anyway, I feel like it's the next 10 or 15 years. This is going to be like a train wreck. Because there's going to be a lot of people. I'm thinking a lot of those Europeans that came here, maybe like my father and my mother, who came here, don't understand these things. And there's going to be a lot of them that are not prepared. And yeah, wow.
Or they'll have a will that's 30 years old.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a bad thing, obviously. But I think I'll take it a step further. What's the real problem today is that because there is such a large pending transfer of wealth, that it draws all the charlatans and the sharks out.
Okay, so what? Yeah, who are they?
And believe it or not, it's family. So,
Okay, give us an example. So, yeah, what would happen?
So the example
doesn't surprise me, but yeah, how does it work?
Oddly enough, I didn't want to make it seem like most elderly people don't have wills. That's not the case. I would say there's a small percentage, but for me, any percentage is too big. Okay. The bigger problem today is that because there's so much money involved, that litigation in the estates sphere has gone through the roof.
Got it.
So what you have is disgruntled beneficiaries or disgruntled children or relatives who have been cut out of the will contesting the will upon the death of the parent or the individual. And there are lawyers that I've seen it. Like I had one lawyer say to me, I don't practice litigation, okay? I'm a planner. I do more administration. So when something gets contentious, I'll bring in an estate litigator. And my colleague said to me, Angelo, he said, there's going to be more money in this than personal injury.
Oh, yeah.
It feels
right
like
now.
it.
Oh, yeah. And the pot of money is right there. And they get it first.
So now, sorry, I'm curious. I have a feeling it's a long answer, but how do you make it so that your estate or will can't be contested?
There is no way. What you can...
I was hoping for a
and
long answer that was I didn't know it was going to be a simple, horrible answer.
Yeah.
No, it is a horrible answer.
You want to bulletproof it as much as you can.
So what we're trying to do is in Canada, and this is all over the world, but primarily, I think I should have started off by explaining that, our law is a common law-based system based on English law, right? And what that means is we don't have what's called forced heirship, which is what exists in civil law jurisdictions. Europe, for example, Croatia, France, Portugal, Italy, Spain, many of the South American countries, and Quebec in Canada. The other provinces in Canada are all common law jurisdictions, okay? So what does that mean? That means common law is law created by courts through precedent and court cases over the years and interpreting legislation, and the courts, whatever they've deemed to be the highest court of the land, deems to be the fairest interpretation of a law, is what the law will be, okay? Now, that has permitted us, the English tradition, of having what we call testamentary freedom. Testamentary freedom means that you can decide who you want to leave your assets to when you die, within certain limitations. The biggest limitations or restrictions are there are family law provisions. You as a married individual cannot leave nothing to your wife or to your dependents. So we have dependent support and relief provisions that protect people that you are dependent upon you, that you have treated as your dependents, meaning you've provided for them, like children who are disabled or have never worked, and you've provided for them their whole lives. They expect that same standard of living, just as a spouse is entitled to all those rights under the Family Law Act. Okay. Aside from the big ones like that, the law says you have freedom to decide. I've got 3 kids. They're all on their own. They're all doing pretty good. When I speak, I'm going to give you real life examples without naming names, obviously, of files I've worked on. So I have one file, that's in litigation now, where the father in his 90s came to me, and he was Italian, worked in construction, he had amassed some assets during his lifetime. Nicest man, fought in the war, Second World War, was a prisoner, told me his whole life story. Smartest guy on the planet. He would drive to my office, 96 years old.
Oh, wow.
Can you believe this guy?
Wow.
Unbelievable. Sure enough, he comes to see me. His wife had passed away, and he wanted to disinherit some of his children.
Jeez.
So
I feel like laughing when I hear that. I guess
They
it's not
probably
something you should
deserved it.
laugh at.
Screw them.
At 96, he's decided. I guess those children are probably like in their 70s or
Yeah.
something at that point. Holy smokes.
well, actually, they're not that old.
No?
I think
Okay.
he
Oh.
had children later in
Oh,
life.
wow. Okay.
I would say that the majority of them at the time were in their 50s.
Okay.
Maybe the eldest was 60.
Okay. Got it.
He had 3 daughters and a son, and the son was living with him, with his wife and children in the same home, taking care of their father because he needed help. So the son sold his house, and he sold his house so that he could go live with his son. What does he do? He gives the son a whack of money, saying, here we go, you're taking care of me and yada, yada. Thank you for that. But his biggest gripe was that he had 3 daughters who never reached out to talk to him, call him. When his wife was ill with Alzheimer's and dying, they barely cared. But when mom passed away and dad was 96, they started coming around asking questions about, hey, what are you going to do with the house? What's in the will? And
Yeah, got it. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And it started getting beyond inquisitive and became aggressive, where they were demanding that, they see the will and that you better make sure that we're included in this and that. So long story short, I explained to him that by doing this, you're opening up litigation when you're gone. And your son is going to have to fend off lawsuits from his sisters, your daughters, and all. Because although we have testamentary freedom, we also have the right to go to court and plead our case. And what people do is they try to find ways to find holes in that person's will or circumstances such as undue influence, or they were coerced to do that. The child who got more influenced the parent or scared them, said, I'm going to kick you out and you're going to live on the street if you don't leave everything to me. So they have to make a case to prove that, right? So let's just say, without getting too much into this, that it's probably the most disgusting part of what I see in my practice. It really turns my stomach when I see family fighting with family over money. But it is so prevalent today that, it's just a flock of lawyers have just flocked into this area, because there's a demand for it.
Yeah.
And because it's so lucrative. So anyway, I thought I would say that. So it's important for people to know. Everyone always asks me, well, I can do whatever I want. By the way, I turn away most people who call me wanting to disinherit.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's
this
a lawsuit waiting to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the problem today. It's actually, this is what bothers me so much, is that we as lawyers, because we've drafted the will, the onus is on us to be the capacity assessor to establish, by law, I'm required when I prepare a will for someone that I have to determine whether that person has the mental capacity and wherewithal to understand what they are telling me in drafting that will for them. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist, but
And then you could be forced to defend your decision, I assume.
I do.
At some point.
You could be
Repeated.
liable for losses.
I do. I am
What a
involved
profession that you're
in a number
Angelo, you should change. Is it too late? You get
Right?
into a different.
right? Well, I was
I've
thinking,
always given lawyers a hard time. I always give lawyers a hard time, but now I'm
Yeah,
hearing this. I'm like, okay, maybe there's something that they've earned here.
right. So I'm getting busier because most of my colleagues have decided they don't want to do this
Sure.
anymore.
Yeah, and I can't really blame them. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So what does that do then? It drives up the cost, right? So when I started practicing 25 years ago, we would do wills, basic wills for people, right? I die everything to my wife or husband. We're both dead to the kids equally. We were doing wills for $300 20 years ago. Now, I would say they've gone, well into the thousands, depending on how many trusts are involved and things like that.
Broken families,
Broken
remarriages,
families,
yeah,
remarriages.
marriage,
Right.
children from different families. Sorry, children from.
Okay, so how do we? What do people do? What do they think about when asking to get a will? Is there a standard advice that you would give, like in looking at the lawyer? Like, what should the type of lawyer? Some people might reach out to you, Angelo, but if they're listening to this and I don't know, they're in British Columbia and they're going to reach out to a local lawyer, are there questions they should ask of a lawyer?
100%. I mean, all the information is on the internet, first of all. I have people come into my office already knowing, oh, I know what an executor is, and I read this, just like my 85-year-old client last week. She was testing me. I know what she was doing. She had done all this research on the internet and came in and started grilling me because she knew the answers, which is great. It helps me do my job. But in a nutshell, people who do enough of this in my business, they have standardized a lot of the questioning. So what we do is, as soon as a client comes to see me and they decide they want to retain us to prepare their wills or whatever else is involved, we have a questionnaire that we'll send out to them. And in that questionnaire, we ask them to give us as much detail as possible. Have you been married before? Do you have a cohab agreement, a marriage contract, kids, any divorces, health, what assets do you own, registered, unregistered, real estate? I want it all. It's probably about 20 pages long. And what people really like about that is that it doesn't just help me to understand what you have.
It's helping them.
It's helping them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, it really is. And it's like, where's the debt? And, oftentimes it starts with a person like me, like the accountant, financial planner, right? And I have a bit of an answer for your question. Anybody who's listening across the country, when you're looking for a lawyer that does this, my sniff test, because I deal with so many lawyers. I deal with so many lawyers. When it comes to wills and estates, is this a significant portion of their practice, aka 30% or more of their practice? If it is not, just spend the extra $500,000 and go with someone who does this.
500.
No,
I think you said 500,000.
No. Sorry, spend the extra $500. Yeah, sorry,
500 or 1,000
or $1,000, right? 500. Like the difference between someone who does this as a significant component of their practice and someone who doesn't.
Okay, that's a good filter.
Sure. They're going to charge a little bit more. You know why? Because they know what's involved. Whereas
they've seen all the screw
the
up.
jack of all trades doesn't know what's involved, and they're just going to put it together. And the issue is, in my opinion, if we rewind back to probably one of the first times I came on this show, you asked me what estate planning is, I believe, right? And I said, listen, estate planning is really, you got a bunch of stuff and you want to know where it's going to go. You care about who's going to get that stuff, right? And really the master document that dictates this is captured in the will. It's really captured in the will, not the memo that I write that has instructions to an insurance guy, to a lawyer, to your own accountant. It's not that document. That's the plan overall. It's all carried out by the will, because if the drafting of the will is incorrect, it's all going to crumble. It's just going to crumble. And to spend a couple $1,000 to make sure that, when you die, you don't have to be worrying about that. And dealt with people on their deathbed. You know what I mean?
Jeez.
One of my first clients, who was actually a client of Rockstar, I met her through Rockstar, just passed away, and I was in the hospital with her.
I know who
right?
you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about, right? And I'm telling you right now, the biggest thing on people's mind when they are on their deathbed, I kid you not, is their money and how it's going to get transferred to the beneficiaries. Yeah. That is the last, it sounds stupid, but that is legit the last thing people are thinking about. I was probably the first person this person texted or called.
When she was at that point, you're not going to have any more experiences. You're not going to hang out with family anymore. Now it's done.
Now you want to make sure the people that you love
are
taken care of. So like I said, I was the first person.
So now I can see your pain and why you wanted to talk about this, because if you find someone doesn't have a will, immediately you're like, oh shit, this just got 10 times more complicated. And some people are going to get screwed that maybe shouldn't get screwed.
Many people are going to get screwed that shouldn't get screwed, right? So it's not necessarily about just the tax plan and just that. It's about the mess that I want to avoid. I've been involved as a financial advisor and accountant, tax advisor to a number of different estates. And I had an estate that took more than 20 years to wind up and close out. More than 20. We had to do a voluntary disclosure on a disposition of a property by the trust, by the estate. There was litigation involved between the different beneficiaries. There was a second marriage. It was just a complete disaster. Could easily have been taken care of with a properly drafted will. These people had a 2-pager that whomever it is that closed their property back in the 70s put it together, and it didn't really list anything out properly.
This is a good commercial for just spend everything you have in your last couple of years. just spend it all. Sell everything and spend it.
That's what my elderly clients resolved at the end of the meeting. We're going to go blow it all. Blow it all.
It's just easier. This is the easier way out for everybody.
Right.
And it's really not that difficult of a task. I'm in the process right now with Angelo of doing my will. My parents are in the process of doing their will with him, and my mom's a lawyer, right? She could easily just try
but
to
you
do
want
her
the
own
specialty.
Exactly.
Okay, so there's this intake form, 20 pages long or so. You gather all the information from that. Then, Angelo, you and your office make a judgment call on how to structure this will.
It's not really a judgment call. It's guided by the client and our advice to the client. And by the way, I don't operate in a vacuum. Usually if the clients have, enough assets, I'm working with the accountant.
Yeah, got it.
So if Fabio's sending them to me, I will talk to him and I'll say, okay, what's the deal here? What do they have? They have companies, like I met with someone the other day, had 3 companies, successful guy in construction, right? And,
It turns out they actually had a second will.
And it turns out
that's what I sent them. Right. I sent them for a second will, because a second will, you can avoid probate.
A corporate will. Yeah.
Corporate will, basically, right? You can avoid probate. And I said, hey, listen, by the
probate tax is that 1.5% tax?
1.5% of the fair market value of anything that goes through the court.
Okay, and a second will, how do you have a second will in place specifically for your corporations? Or owned by your corporation?
There's a couple things you can put in a second will.
So let's not get, it's colloquially called a corporate will, but the reason why I don't like calling it a corporate will is because of what you just said. It doesn't just deal with corporate assets.
Okay, got it.
So do you want to talk about that now?
Let's hold for 1 second.
I wanted to make one really important
Yeah.
comment, and it was about Fabio's statement where he met with this lady who was in the hospital dying. I get those calls all the time, right? Because either the kids need a power of attorney, which we haven't even talked about, but when we do an estate plan, it involves powers of attorney and a will, because what people forget is the will speaks when you die. The powers of attorney apply while you're still alive, but you may be mentally or physically incapable of making decisions on your own. So you get the call from the hospital, and it's a child whose parent, the husband or wife has died, they're alone, and the doctors need to perform some procedure, and they can't because under our Healthcare Consent Act and by law, doctors require consent, legal consent, to perform procedures such as surgeries. And if the patient is unable to provide it, they have to get it from someone. And that someone if there's no power of attorney giving that someone the authority to make that decision on behalf of the patient who's in a coma or whatever, Alzheimer's, unable to make that decision, you got a problem. Got to go to court, spend a lot of money to convince a judge to give that person the authority to make those decisions. So what I wanted to say about what he was saying is about that woman, that happened to me about 2 months ago, but it brought up a really important point. If that woman is married, it's not so bad.
Right.
Okay? Because the odds are that she probably has jointly held assets with her spouse or a child or whatever, if she's elderly. The problem arises for people who are common law, who are not legally married. And unfortunately, in this province of Ontario, common law partners, spouses, have different legal entitlements than legally married spouses. And today, I don't want to shoot out a number, but I think common law outnumber the legally married.
It's very possible.
Right?
Especially for tax common law, it's 1 year. Cohabitation for family law, my understanding, is 3 years.
Right.
And then for estate law, like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's complicated, but it's dependent on a number of factors, right? But let's say it's 2 to 3 years common law, right?
Yeah.
So you get a situation where someone owns a house with their common law partner. Let's say it's the husband, the spouse, the partner. You got to be careful how you classify people, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say the partner, being the man, has legal title to the home that they live in. Because when they decided they were going to cohabit, he had a house and she just moved in.
Okay, got it.
And they've lived there for the last, which is very common, by the way. One of them typically has title to a home. They may have their own home, they sell it or rent it out while they move in with the other partner's spouse property. And they never put the property into joint ownership. Now, the partner who has title to the house might have children from a previous marriage. So in his mind, he's like, well, if I die, I want to make sure my kids are provided for from my previous marriage. Now, the common law partner, the female, the woman, she's been living there for 20 years. She's probably contributed to the mortgage, to the repairs, the upkeep, but legally she has no entitlement if he dies to that property. She would have to bring a very complicated legal action called a constructive trust claim to establish that she has rights in that property because she's contributed money, labor, services over a period of 20 years. Now she's going to be drawn into a fight with the kids who probably received everything under their father's will, right? Mm-hmm. But she has no entitlements. It gets
I
even
just
worse.
assumed that was the matrimonial home under common law.
They're not married.
But they're not legally married.
So what's the whole deal with common? Okay, that sounds like a whole other thing. But
I want people to understand by this example the complexity of this
I'm starting
area.
To see that.
Because what it draws on, and that's why when you and I first met and we started talking, I told you about how I got into this.
Yeah.
All right.
You got sucked into it, and now you're the expert because you've been seen so much of it.
Right.
Yeah.
But you see, most people don't go to these big law firms downtown where I started. See, the beauty of big law firms is that you've got people in every discipline working there. So if I was a lawyer downtown, I'd walk down the hall and go talk to the tax guy.
Yeah.
I'd go down the hall, talk to the divorce guy or the family lawyer. Or if I had an employment question, I'd go back to the employment lawyer. But most of us who don't work in large law firms, and most people can't afford $800 to $1,000 an hour for those type of lawyers, right? Usually big companies deal with them. They will go to a lawyer like myself, and if they don't know what they're doing and they're dabbling, just preparing a basic will that they've printed off the internet and thinking they've done their client a service, well, they've possibly done a really big disservice to that person and their family and heirs because they're unaware of the interpolation or the, how family law affects real estate law, affects tax law, affects estates law. All of these things intertwining.
Okay, I'm sold on the importance of a basic will. It's not basic anymore from
Yeah.
what I understand.
I think that's the point.
Yeah, I get it. Okay, so it's super important. I wanna ask you a couple other questions here, but on the will still, is there an order of like who gets precedence if there's taxes owing on an estate and there's creditors on the estate and there's beneficiaries? Is there like a default order? Does like CRA always get paid first and then the creditors, or is there, how does the money get
That's
dispersed
actually a
there?
good question for you.
You want me to answer it?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Is it case by case, or is it always CRAs getting their
no,
money?
there's a pretty de facto procedure.
Okay.
Creditors have to always get paid first.
Okay.
Typically, a standard will have a provision that says.
Sorry, Angelo. Can you go
Oh,
come back? I apologize.
No, it's okay. Typically, a will start off saying, Executor, I want you to take in all of my assets that form part of my estate, and from those assets, whether they're liquid or illiquid, pay all my just debts that are due and owing.
Got it. Okay.
So that's the
how
first step.
Okay.
Right? You can't go and start distributing stuff without paying taxes and your creditors and all of that. In fact, one of the first things that an executor has to do is they have to publish the death or notice to creditors. And it's a protective mechanism for executors. We don't do it all the time. For example, if I'm dealing with an elderly couple, they were employed, were salaried employees for most of their lives, didn't own a business, really wouldn't have any creditors.
Yeah, I get it.
I'm not too worried. But if they have substantial assets, own businesses, now the potential or the risk of them having debts is much higher. If you as an executor do not publish, it's a cover your ass mechanism. You basically, there's methods or mediums upon which we advertise for creditors. There's one in the Canada Gazette, the Ontario Reports. Now there's an electronic service which is really nice, where they allow you to publish electronically on this service, and it's deemed to be sufficient service under our legislation. So by doing that, you as the executor, you protect yourself. You say, I advertised for creditors, nobody came forward, so I'm good. Now I can start liquidating the estate. God forbid you don't. And as you're liquidating the estate or you've distributed the estate, you find out, you get a letter in the mail.
Somebody shows up.
Somebody shows up and says, hey, this guy owed me $800,000 for money I lent him. Or CRA says, hey, he hasn't paid source deductions for like 30 years.
One of the key things from a tax.
Oh, by the way, sorry, to finish off, the executor is personally liable for those debts.
Yes.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. So the executor is personally liable for filing all of the deceased's previous tax returns that have not been filed, along with the terminal return and the rights and things return if they choose to file a rights and things return, along with the graduated rate estate returns, blah 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 blah. All these returns have to be filed by the executor.
So when someone names
and the money
you,
has to be paid. So if you die and you're 10 years back, 10 years late on your, which I dealt with this before, you're 10 years late on filing, the executor has to make sure you're caught up, right? So
but nothing can escape the estate, because if there's not enough money in the estate to pay for some unpaid taxes, the executor can't fall on the executor.
No, unless the executor
Messed up.
up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
The
That's
executor would have
I
to
get that.
messed up.
I was gonna say that's fair. I still don't even think that's fair, but I get that.
But I think that
Yeah.
the normal rules for debts, and correct me if I'm wrong, Angelo, would apply here. Secured debts obviously are going to come first. Unpaid for, let's say you have a sole proprietorship or some unpaid trust type taxes, such as HST and payroll remittances, that comes
Makes sense. Okay.
before, let's say, an income tax amount or whatnot. There's going to be a sort of a hierarchy,
pecking order,
right?
yeah.
There's going to be a pecking order on the debts, but the idea is, as the executor, you want to make sure that all the debts are paid and that you've taken every possible measure to pay all of those debts, and then get some sort of confidence, let's say getting a clearance certificate from the CRA stating that everything is filed, everything is good, and you've paid all paid all the taxes.
So we're going to finish this discussion with you telling us that executors don't make enough money for what they have to deal with.
Yeah, I'm starting to see that
It's
the
gonna come
executor,
around.
because now I could see like I think Nick and I over the years have been named, like people will just let us know, and you know, hey, you know, I think could they have done this to us?
Yes, they can, but you don't have to accept.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that, you know, I think sometimes you're like, oh, well, that's nice. Thanks for letting us know. I guess, yeah, appreciate you with such a responsibility. But now hearing all this sounds like a disaster.
Yeah, I personally act often as an advisor to an estate.
Yeah.
But my role is more on, let's time the tax mechanism and the cash flow of the estate well before people die. Dealing with the estate after matter, it's not my
that's where your planning seems to come in.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's so much more even to ask you just on this will here, but now I want to just transition a little bit to the corporate will. So can you summarize, what is a corporate will for those people who have not heard of it, and what would be the benefit of having one?
So it's not really a corporate will. It's that's a colloquialism.
Oh, sorry.
I
Okay.
think
Is it a
accountants
second
love to
second
call it-
will?
yeah.
Is that what you prefer?
It's a secondary will.
Okay.
So accountants love to call it corporate will because it satisfies a need for them in the corporate context.
Okay.
Right? So by law, you can have multiple wills. Start off with that. Okay, there's a case, 1998, Ontario Court of Appeal, called Granovsky. Long story short, the Ontario Court of Appeal came out and said, hey guys, CRA challenged a woman who had multiple wills. She had 2 wills to minimize the burden of estate tax. And the CRA challenged it. And it went to the courts. Finally, appellate court decided, no, she's entitled to have as many wills as she wants, as long as she's not doing anything that's evading tax, deemed to be tax evasion. Individuals are free to organize their affairs in the most tax-efficient manner. I believe that's what the judge said. And he went on to say, individuals can have as many wills as they like, or a primary and a secondary will. So multiple wills means you can have more than one will. In the old days, before this case, everybody typically had one will, right? When you die, everything falls into your estate, right? That's where, all the tax issues arise. There's a deemed disposition on death, right? And it triggers all this tax. Not only probate fees, but income tax, capital gains, and whatnot, other income taxes. So lawyers and accountants started getting crafty over the years. How do we minimize all these taxes our clients got to pay with this will and when they die? So inter vivos trusts started getting created, which are living wills in the U.S., they call them. Family trusts.
Spousal trusts.
So all of these fancy mechanisms. But in 1998, this court case kind of opened up this world, this additional possibility to minimize probate fees. So how does it work? Well, it's quite simple. When you die, everything falls into your will. You got a will, that's your primary will, and it deals with all your assets. However, maybe people don't know this, you hear the word probate. It's an old word, but we still use it today. Probate means your executor that you've named in that will has this will that says that he's got to go and divide all these assets among these beneficiaries. So he's going to show up at the bank and say, hey, look, I got a will. It says here that you got to give me all the money in that bank account because the guy died. I'm his executor. It says right here, and I got to give it to his beneficiaries. The banker's going to look at him like, who the hell are you?
Get out of here.
I don't know who you are. So as a method of legitimizing the executor's role and validating the will, because we all know third parties, in particular institutions like banks, insurance companies, hate liability, right? They don't want to be sued after by some beneficiary saying, hey, that wasn't the valid last will and testament. It was amended 3 or 4 times before, mom or dad died. So as a method of validating that will, that it is in fact the last will and testament of the deceased, and giving the executor the legal authority they need to be able to deal with the assets and administer them, the English courts developed the probate system. So there's a court. It was traditionally called the Probate Court. Now it's the Estates Court. And what will happen is when someone dies, the executor will call the lawyer and say, what do I need to do? So we'll take a look at the assets. Typically, we may need to send it off to probate. And at that point, to get that will probated, they have to pay tax, the executor. And the tax is that 1.5% that you mentioned. On the total value of the assets falling within the will. Okay. Now, you don't need probate. Everybody says, well, I got to pay probate. not everyone requires a will to be probated, because the reason for probate is that third parties are asking for this. It's either third parties are asking for it or the law mandates it. So when does the law mandate it? I'll give you an easy example. Real estate. If you own real estate in the land title system in Ontario, which is probably 98% of all titles in Ontario, because we started transferring them all into the land title, the Torrens system in 1984, the Land Titles Act specifically states that for land to be transferred from a deceased, right, for an executor to transfer that land, they require a transmission application. That's a formal document that you go to the real estate lawyer, he's going to prepare a transmission application transferring the legal title of that property into the trustee's name or the executor's name so that they can sell it to a third party, right? To be able to get to that place, you need to probate the will. And the Land Titles Act makes that clear, okay? So that's why, you have probate. Now, there are exceptions. This is where it gets really gray, right? So you've got some of these properties under the registry system, the old properties. So most properties that are still in registry that haven't been converted, there's a few left. It's typically older properties in the city of Toronto, believe it or not, because the city of Toronto probably has the oldest real estate in the province. It was the first settled area. Rural properties, crown lands, things like that. But old properties and typically rural properties. Now, there's an exception where if the testator, the deceased, bought that property under the registry system before all the lands were converted to land titles, and they did nothing with that property, meaning there were no first dealings with that property by the date of death, then there's an exemption. And you don't have to probate the will to transfer that property under that person's will. Okay, so that's just one example. Another one is trusts, right? If you have an interest in a family trust, or someone might hold a property in trust for you where you retain beneficial ownership, but they have legal title, that doesn't fall. There's no requirement for probate. So this is some probate planning that we do with our clients to minimize the fees and taxes that they pay when they die. So I'm going to get to the secondary will now. So we have two wills, let's call it, right? Primary, secondary. Easier way to think of them is public, private. Some people, lawyers, like to use a public will, private will when they refer to them. Public meaning all wills that get probated are a matter of public record because they get filed at the courthouse. So anybody can go and see what this person's will said. You pay the whatever the fee is.
Got it. Yeah.
So it's a public will.
It's like pulling title. I think I remember doing that title offices, $7 or $8, and I could pull title.
Well, it's gone up since then.
Has it? Yeah. I'm old guy. Yeah, it's not $7.
$7, man. Inflation. I don't remember $7. How old are you?
Yeah. Someone recently called me long in the tooth. They said, "You're pretty long in the tooth." I don't know. I'm pretty good.
Yeah. So anyway, your public will gets probated, and that gets registered at the estates court, and anyone can see it. Then you have your private will or your secondary will, which the accounts like to call the corporate will. That will, what we do is we will have everything that doesn't require probate to go into that will. And it's called private because nobody sees it. The accounts like to call it the corporate will because it primarily deals with private shares in private corporations owned by individuals. So if you have a company, a holding company that owns real estate.
Got it. Okay.
A business, an operating business, a manufacturing business, your business here, whatever. You own shares in a company. What happens to those shares when you die? How are they disposed of? Well, if you only had one will, all of these assets would fall into that will. We'd have to get it probated. We have to determine the value of all these assets, and you got to pay tax on that.
So this is almost a way of just sheltering a portion of your assets off the will,
right?
Off the public will into the private.
Well, it's off public record, and
Yeah.
you don't have to pay the probate.
Yeah,
So
got it.
Easily, this could save hundreds of thousands of dollars if somebody has. Some of your clients have 15 properties.
Yeah.
By the time they die, that could easily be worth. The mortgages are paid off. It's worth $15 million, $20 million.
Yeah.
right? You
If
do
you
the math.
extrapolate out 20 years from today,
Yeah.
30 years from today.
Yeah, you do the math. That's hundreds of thousands of dollars of probate. Plus, it's all public. Nosy people can go and
See what they had.
see what they
Wow.
have.
So
have a private.
high net worth families typically started doing this because they wanted the privacy. They didn't want the public to know what they owned. So they started sheltering under these secondary wills because nobody sees that. The only people who see the secondary will are the accountant, the lawyer who drafted it, and CRA.
Got it.
And eventually the executor, of course.
yeah, okay.
Right? So that's how we shelter,
Okay.
right, assets and minimize probate fees.
Trusts are another method.
Yeah, there's so many.
Yeah. So what's your favorite? Because I know there's so many here.
Yeah.
But between maybe, I don't know, Fab, if you want to call, or Angelo, what's one other thing? I know a lot of people throw out the term family trust. Is that something that you deal with a lot or
you
see a lot?
See that? I mean, if you have assets, you can do a roll of assets into a corporation, freeze the value for mom and dad, and then issue the growth shares to a discretionary family trust. And, then all the growth of the assets over the, let's say, last 20 years of mom and dad's life goes to the kids. And the kids are the beneficiaries. It doesn't even have to be probated. There's nothing to probate, right? Because the preferred shares would presumably go under a second will, and the trust assets technically belong to the kids anyways. So
family trust, though, if you probably
I've seen a million of
they
them. And
don't really help people who own real estate. It's
Yeah.
more for
operating
companies.
businesses
Yeah,
or
okay.
holding companies,
Yeah.
right? Or if the real estate is already in a holding company, one of the issues that we've been dealing with, and I was speaking to you about it, is implementing an estate freeze for people that own property personally is a little bit difficult in Ontario because there's no mirroring provisions to Section 85 of the Income Tax Act that allows us to bypass capital gains taxation by transferring property to a corporation. You just have to pay land transfer tax. End of story. And then it becomes very expensive. I'm investigating an alternative using a partnership or a limited partnership. I believe you were talking about a general partnership, but I'm seeing it with a limited partnership, some success there. And partnership units or interest in a partnership.
You were mentioning, is that like a specialty? Because I feel like most people don't know about partnership.
Partnerships are very uncommon. They're very common, let's say in the west coast, I think, with oil and gas and that kind of stuff. They're very, very popular. They're very popular limited partnerships, for
And real
example.
estate holders.
Yeah, real for conglomerate real estate holdings, limited partnerships are a very useful tool. In professional services, limited liability partnerships are very popular. I think that they're an underutilized structure because they are inherently a little bit more complicated
And expensive.
from both a legal standpoint and from a tax reporting and accounting standpoint than just your straight corporation. But I am investigating this, and I'm actually working as well with Angelo on the legal side. Maybe a structure that I've seen successfully used in the past to freeze these assets, freeze these pieces of real estate. And this would be something really more for high net worth individuals, because the price for such a reorganization would be a lot. It would be a lot. It would be a lot of legal drafting, a lot of accounting, a lot of valuation.
I just see the importance of dealing with someone like you. I know it's sounding like a commercial for you guys, but I get it because I didn't grow up in a family like this. So I see the importance of someone to understand the insurance element of tax planning, someone to understand the tax specific planning of, and I mean legal on the legal side, and for you just looking at the overall estate. And then like the legal structures that you are, the corporations you have set up, the wills, the second will. Now I don't even know what to call the second will. All these kind of things that you need in place. It is like you need your own power team on once you start building up some assets in your life, which I've never really thought about. I always just thought about like, hey, you're going to build a business and, you're going to have some real estate. You need the right real estate lawyer. You need a good accountant. But I've always looked at it from the growth aspect, not from like the distribution aspect as you kind of get older.
But it's not even just that. Think about real estate, right? So we act for a lot of people in construction. A lot of our clients are not just investors of real estate. We act for developers who develop real estate and builders, right? So when you say, we grew up and we never dealt with this, I understand that because everybody started off with a rental property at some point.
Yeah.
And then they bought two. Yeah. And then they decided they wanted to get into the home renovation business. And then they decided, I'm going to start buying lots and I'm going to start building houses.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. Now I think I want to do an infill with 10 of them.
That's exactly.
And that's
actually, we recorded another podcast today on exactly what you just described.
Right?
But literally exactly what
I've
you
seen
described.
this in my own practice. So my clients, when I say I grow with my clients, my clients started off small guys. And then they eventually became builders. So you got to understand how limited partnerships work because these are the vehicles they're using. You got to understand how joint ventures work and how that comes into play in estate planning and taxation. So long story short, what I'm trying to say is I'm reinforcing and reiterating exactly what you said. It's so complicated. There's so much involved that you need a team.
Yeah. I'm just disappointed because I used to be able to make fun of lawyers a lot, Angelo. I used to make fun of lawyers all the time.
I make fun of them all the time.
I rip lawyers every single day of my life. Like they went to school.
And now I'm valuing them. Yeah, I'm valuing them more and more. Like I'm valuing the lawyers more and more, and I'm disappointed in myself.
Well, listen, I would tell you right now.
By the way, there are shoemakers in every field.
For sure, yeah.
And we can even say that about doctors today. I hate to say that. But this,
every field,
every field's going to have people that take shortcuts. Yeah. But ultimately, the idea is, when I started off, I tried to do everything because I was like, I didn't want to say no to a client, and now I'm saying no as much as I say yes because it's like, like I said, I had 4 new client inquiries today, and one of them was a hard no after the first sentence. But I continued with it, and I said, you're going to go to this other guy. He's a reorg specialist, blah, 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 blah. Because why am I going to try to figure that out? Yeah, there was
too complex.
10, 15 grand of work on the table. But then if I screw it up, there's 250 grand of liability.
Right. It's just not worth it. So we'll wrap because there's more. I feel like we've gone well over an hour here, but we can wrap here. But I feel like I want to talk to you more about like just your thoughts on trust and all limited partnerships and when and where and how. But we can leave that for another day. Maybe I can bug you guys to come in. Is there anything else just on the whole will idea that you wanted to get across? I think it's clear to me the responsibility of the executor. The importance of that role, and now I can see why they would get paid some. I understand that
money, and
the importance of just having a good will in place. It's very clear to me.
I think we got the point.
I think the big takeaway here today for me, I really came here to make this point. It's not to impress people with big fancy words. That's we can get into the complex stuff for people if they need it. But most people don't need that. When I say most, the average income in this country for a couple is what, $63,000?
Yeah.
70 grand.
70 grand?
Like yeah.
So let's assume the average person comes to us who's in that category, owns their own house, has a mortgage on it, maybe a cottage, whatever. Those people need a will because you don't bother to invest. And it is the greatest investment you'll make in your life, not your RSPs and your TFSAs and all of that, because they'll go up and down. But one thing is certain, you're going to die. And when you die, you don't want to leave a mess for your beneficiaries. And you will leave a mess for them without a will. I think that's the big takeaway. Even if it's a basic will, get it done. And then, as you grow and your assets grow, you can get into all of these other
all these weird
weird
It's
stuff.
become clear to me also that if you could just spend everything you have strategically.
Yes, time it for the
just
last
time it on your
moment.
Last day. You're going down with the last $100, right?
I'm sure your kids would love that, Tom.
Yeah, but you know what? I've seen enough. I've seen enough people. Like I said, I deal with money. That's what I do. I deal with money, and high net worth individuals, for the most part, other than crooks, right? And even crooks, when you get that news from the doctor that you're going to die, most people don't say, fuck it, I'm going to go party.
Yeah. They start trying to get organized.
The first thing that comes to their mind is
my kids,
the people that I'm
family.
My family, my children, my spouse. That is the first thing that comes to their mind. and that is the last thing on their mind until they take their last breath. So it's an important thing. The reason I brought Angelo on to talk about this stuff is because I'm not an expert on it, and I get questions from the listeners and from
Yeah, we know lots of our
all the
clients
time.
will ask you, and
I don't have the answer.
yeah.
So I wanted to bring him on just to touch on it
I
so that we
appreciate
get the
that.
idea.
You guys are in an interesting spot because I feel like the perspective that you both have on life is interesting to me because you deal with this so much. You see the transition of family. You see people at the end of their lives. You
Right.
see some of the arguing that goes on. And I think it might kind of strangely help you in your lives prioritize what's important and not important, you know, because you're just seeing all this stuff. And I feel like sometimes it might just help you get your own priorities in order. I mean, that's none of my business. I'm just thinking from your seats. You have a view into people's lives that sometimes their most, emotional moment, their most vulnerable moments. And not all of us see that regularly. It can also weigh on you. So take care of yourselves, as you go.
I'll be fine.
As you go through.
Well, listen, one of the benefits of seeing craziness in everybody's lives is looking at your own and saying, shit, I got a pretty good life.
Yeah, pretty good life.
So
Very
I'm
grateful.
pretty good. Yeah. Thank
So,
God.
Angela, where do people, if they listen to this and they want to find you, do you want to just define who's a good client for you or the website? How would people reach out to you, and who would reach out to you?
When it comes to wills and estate planning, anyone is a good client who wants a will. I'm happy to help them. I'm not going to be the cheapest guy on the block. I won't be the most expensive, but when you come to me, you're going to get a breadth of experience. I've got 25 years of experience.
And Ontario, probably an Ontario resident?
Must be, someone who owns assets in
Ontario.
So
Okay.
we have BC clients who have assets here and in British Columbia. We cannot deal with the British Columbia assets or real estate. They have to have their own will over there.
Okay.
That's a
So
discussion for
assets
another
in
day.
Ontario.
Right.
Okay. And your website, we will put links here, but the website is your last name law. So Vumbaca Law.
Yeah. VUMBACA law.
.com. We'll put the link in the show notes. If you're listening to this while you're driving or walking or running, whatever you're doing while you're listening to this, we'll put the show notes, the link to Angelo's website there. And then Fab, just for those people who are hearing you for the first time, your who's your ideal client?
My ideal client, honestly, is somebody who's looking for truly integrated tax and financial planning. So it's not just you're coming to me to get a tax return. You're looking for the full financial plan. I take care of the tax planning, the estate planning, the investment planning. I'm looking at the
The
whole
accounting as well?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
all the accounting.
It's when I get a client, they often come to me for everything, right? It starts with one, and they come to me for everything. That's primarily how I've designed my practice now. So it's not like I'm taking on everybody who wants a tax return. I generally don't take on people who just want a tax return because I can't handle it, right? But you're looking for somebody who's going to give you integrated financial support.
Yeah, cool.
That's what it is.
Thank you both, Fab. This is, you've done this a few times. You come on yourself. You've come on with different people. The expertise that you guys offer to anyone listening here is hugely valuable. So really appreciate this, both of you. Thank you so much for doing
Thanks for
it.
having us.
Thank you. Hey, thanks for tuning in. You can find every new episode of the Your Life, Your Term show on all the major streaming platforms. So Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. And if you'd like to get free copies of some of the books that we've put together, like these right here, or some of the reports that we've put together, like these right here, you can find all of those at www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's it for now. Until next time, your life, your terms.